Hi, in this video I'm going to show you how to make a fully functioning bushcraft fishing rod. You can use this for lure fishing, spinning and all conventional types of float fishing, etc. You will have to change your survival kit a little bit in order to make this rod. So the first thing, you need to get yourself one of these cheap centre pin reels. You can pick these up in junk shops or, you know, on eBay for like £2. They literally are so cheap, they're yesterday's tackle, no one wants them. You might even find your dad or your grandfather's got one kicking around in the shed. I much prefer to put my fishing line on one of these instead of having it wrapped on a kite string holder or just loose wrapped. And this then gives you the main mechanical part you need for your fishing rod. The other thing you'll need to carry is garden wire. It comes in a couple of sizes. This is some really fine stuff, not really much good for the fishing rod making, but you could use this for various situations in survival. And one thing I have used it for lots over the years is making bushcraft fishing weights. You can just take any old stone and wrap it with some wire with an oil, make an eyelet on the end, and you've got yourself a fishing weight. Costs nothing. So this stuff's pretty good. You could also use it to attach your reel to your rod. What you really want is some of the heavy gauge stuff. Now with this you're going to be making some eyelets for your rod. They're just literally twisted loops of wire. You want to make 3 or 4 of this style and then one for the rod tip. It's made slightly different. I'll just run through and show you quickly how I've made these. For the end, for the rod end, if you take a long piece of the wire and just literally bend it, form it round your thumb and put several twists in it. You want it to be quite long because it's got to take quite a lot of pressure if you catch something quite big. And you put a bend in it. You should always carry a pair of pliers in your survival fishing bag because several species of fish you'll catch that have got pretty sharp teeth that could do you some damage. And what I always do on the ends, if you bend these forward a bit, like so, when you lash this to your bushcraft rod, this is going to give some real stability. This is not going to pull off. So that's the end. And for the loops, similar thing. You can just form it round your thumb or the handle. Reduce the handle with your pliers. Just stuff that in. Give it a couple of turns. And then it's just a case of folding that flat. You could trim it down however neat, it doesn't have to be neat. And then obviously the key to your rod is your centre pin reel. Like I said before, really easy to get hold of, cheap, much better way of storing your line anyway in your kit. And then here's the rod that I've Blue Peter style knocked up earlier. As you can see, eyelets are all lashed on and the rod tip lashed on. This is freshly cut out of my garden, nice and springy. I've cut a notch in the back here, which is quite important because once you attach your reel into this makeshift seat, it needs to butt up against the end, because if you hook into a big fish this is going to give you a lot of stability and stop the reel from getting pulled off. So just for quickness, I've got a couple of cable ties here. Ideally you want to lash this on as strong as possible. Trim this excess off. There you go. You could lure fish, spin, or use it as a normal rod. You'll actually have a casting action, which you won't be able to do with a hand line. You won't cast out anywhere near as far, and that's especially important if you're fishing on the coast. If you're using this as a spinning rod, I'd have to go through the basics because not everyone's going to have a good fishing knowledge. This is a spinner. It's basically a treble hook. It's got this little spoon-shaped free spinning device with some fish scale pattern on it. And as you crank the handle of your rod and bring this in, this spins, creating a shiny pattern looking like scales flash. Predatory fish will think that's a fish in distress, and they'll come and grab it, and then one of these treble barbed hooks will nail the fish. You can use these in freshwater and seawater. In the summer months on the coast you could catch mackerel, pollock, bass, garfish, wrasse, herring or sea trout, and freshwater you could catch pike, perch. Not as common, we have the zander, which is a bit of a pike hybrid. You could also catch trout and salmon on the spinning method. And the good thing about going for predatory fish, they're hunting as well. So if they see an opportunity, such as your spinner, they're going to come out of the woodwork. You probably wouldn't see them otherwise, and they strike with such a force, they virtually hook themselves. You could also use lures, or sometimes known as plugs. It's just artificial small fish with a couple of hooks attached to it, and this little spade on the front, as you wind it in, makes the lure dive, so it creates another fish in distress, attracting the predatory fish. So that's that. So obviously that's the Bushcraft fully working fishing rods. You don't need to carry a rod. As long as you've got a centre pin reel, you can make a rod virtually anywhere, and you could even pre-make a few of these wire. This garden wire is brilliant to use where it's coated in plastic because it's got less friction and it's not going to abrade the line. But if you made a load of these up and kept them in your bag, it narrowed the need down to carry a roll of wire, but the wire's got so many applications in survival, it's worth having it in your bag. So that's the rod. There's a couple of other methods you could use for fishing. Obviously you've got the hand line. You could always increase how useful the hand line is to you without having it wrapped around your fingers, by wrapping it around an object like a bottle you might have, or you might find a piece of wood quite a chunky diameter that you can hold on to. But just bear in mind, using a hand line, especially if it's freezing cold, the dexterity of your fingers, topped with the fact that if it's raining, if you're holding a plastic bottle with line wrap around it, after a couple of hours your fingers, your dexterity will get quite poor, and a good take from a fish could pull that out of your hand. So the rod's the way to go every time, I think, but You could also set some manless lines up where you just hammer some wooden stakes into the bank with a set amount of line on. You could use some homemade weights and just have your baited hooks out unmanned, and use barbed hooks for survival every time, because you've got a good chance of keeping any fish on that's going to take them. But you could also spearfish. I brought this years ago. It's just a little spear end, a little barbed harpoon end. It's also got a beer bottle opener on it, which is always handy if you've got some beer hanging around. And the end of it's been ground off to make a screwdriver, and that obviously just lashes on the end of a stick. You could split it first to put it in to give it a really good bite, but you can still pick these up. But if you haven't got one of these,